So we got a trade that is massive for the New York Knicks and possibly even bigger for the rest of the NBA. Mikal Bridges is finally being moved from the Brooklyn Nets onto the New York Knicks, a trade that everybody's been waiting for the past couple of months now, and boy is it a doozy, and there's a lot to discuss. The New York Knicks are going to receive Mikal Bridges and a 2026 second round pick, while the Brooklyn Nets are receiving Bojan Bogdanovic, 4 first rounders from the Knicks, all unprotected, a 2025 first round pick that is a protected pick from the Milwaukee Bucks, a 2028 pick swap, and a 2025 second round pick. And honestly, it makes sense for both teams, potentially a little bit more for the New York Knicks, but I do believe everything makes sense. It's all understandable, more or less a win-win, and here's why. First, when it comes to the Knicks, shout out to the Nova boys. The Villanova connection is stronger than it's ever been. Mikal now joins some of his ex-college teammates, Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, DiVincenzo, all of the brothers coming out of Villanova, and that right there, in and of itself, is a huge selling point, in my opinion, especially for this team that's done a lot just solely off of chemistry and continuity. Boy, I ain't gonna hold you. I do like what they're doing in New York simply off of that move alone, maximizing what these players look like, and moreover, really expediting the process of trying to build chemistry and continuity that normally takes years in the NBA. Get it just like that. And we actually saw it on full display this entire postseason run. And speaking of this postseason, I honestly believe that the run that the Knicks went on in the playoffs is a huge reason why we ended up in this situation. I've said this on stream and on Twitter, and if you're missing out on my takes, make sure you follow me on all other platforms, link in the description. But I personally believe one of the biggest winners, and I would argue the second biggest winner in this year's postseason run, were the New York Knicks. Because the Knicks were basically able to go into the postseason, make a very competitive run while dealing with significant injuries, and now the players who are available has showcased to the front office that just with us being available and playing, look at the success that we were able to achieve. They now feel much more confident going into the offseason, and that's how we end up getting Mikal Bridges. Mikal, in my opinion, is a really, really good piece. I believe a lot of people went sour on him because of his time in Brooklyn, largely just because, I don't know, maybe he didn't fulfill the role that many people thought he was going to be after his time in Phoenix with the Kevin Durant trade. Some people, especially Brooklyn fans, probably had high expectations of him being a potential star, and outside of a handful of games, he really has not been able to live up to those expectations whatsoever. But in my opinion, it ain't really his fault. He has a role, he has an identity. Trying to extend it and over leverage him into a new role that doesn't really fit his playing style, in my opinion, ain't got nothing to do with Mikal, rather than the Nets believing that they got something more than they actually did. And because of that, trading for him was inevitable, and the Knicks landing him, I believe, is a huge, and I do mean huge, upgrade for a roster that is looking for constant defensive pieces and a little bit more athleticism on the perimeter, especially for a team that needs to surround some athletic defensive wings around a smaller Jalen Brunson to try to maximize what this team can do moving forward. Now, a lot of people may say Mikal ain't really that good of a defender anymore, and sure, that's true, but I also believe that's very disingenuous. Over the past year, Mikal's offensive load has increased, which tends to lead certain players to be worse defensively because of the new offensive responsibility, and because of that, he has been worse on the defensive side of the floor than he normally has been back in Phoenix. However, now with his role being reduced, I do believe he's going to have way more energy to expend on the defensive side of the floor, and that player that we saw in Phoenix is something that we probably should now see out in New York. Moreover, offensively is a part of his game that I think will really carry over into this new system alongside Jalen Brunson, because I do believe the one aspect that many people are overlooking is how much he's progressing, growing offensively, and these are signs that I started to see even when he was in Phoenix before he got traded for KD, attacking closeouts, creating his own shot off the dribble, finishing at the basket. These are all signs of him growing within a specific role that, in my opinion, was really going to make Phoenix a much more legitimate threat as time progressed. You have a Mikal Bridges who spent an entire year and some change as the first option or second option offensively. He's now going to grow from that. You pick that up, you pair it with Jalen Brunson with hopefully more effort defensively as well, and I do believe it adds a little bit more dynamic play on both sides of the floor that the Knicks desperately need. This also kind of then leads into the other players who, in my opinion, are expendable. Mitchell Robinson, several reports claiming that he's more than likely not going to come back on the team, and even though there hasn't been anything broken about Julius Randle yet, the amount of money he's making on his contract with a handful of more picks that they have at their disposal, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they start shipping him around for other players in the front court, or even some depth that this team is going to need moving forward to make their roster a bit more well-rounded to, again, maximize this window that they have, because it's an amazing window. But the one thing I have to highlight is the relationship that they have with OG Anunoby right now, and why I even would go as far as to say that the amount of draft picks that they gave for Mikal. Though seems like a lot, it may end up being justifiable because of the reports that we're starting to see about OG Anunoby and what he is demanding. And that is $35 million a year. I'm sorry, I'm not paying OG Anunoby that much money. If you believe that he's worth that, have at it. I know that the salary cap is going to continue to go up. I know there's going to be more money to be spending, but I believe if you're in New York, you want to make sure you not only capitalize on the talent, but also the financial flexibility that you have at your disposal as well. Jalen Brunson is underpaid. DiVincenzo, Josh Hart are also on very, very good contracts. And even Mikal, a lot of people may not be too fond of him, but looking at how much money he's making, somewhere around the $20 million range, I also believe that's really good for who he is. So tying yourself up with an OG Anunoby contract, to me, is crazy when it could get to the tune of $35 million because that's what he is looking for. Furthermore, there are now reports claiming that the Knicks will not be able to retain Isaiah Hartenstein if they decided to go in the route of bringing back OG Anunoby, which in my opinion is even further reason to why this trade makes even more sense. Because if it was me, I would not be willing to lose out on Isaiah Hartenstein. What he was able to do for this team was really, really great, just so I can sign back OG Anunoby, who A, isn't worth anywhere near close to 30 to 35 million, has very clear limitations offensively, but more importantly, I do believe that Mikal Bridges is a better version of OG Anunoby. Sure, OG defensively much more versatile, and it has been reported that the Knicks are trying to keep as much wing depth as possible to match up with the Boston Celtics moving forward, which is smart, but it shouldn't come to the tune of paying someone $35 million when the team that you're trying to compete with in Boston is paying Jaylen Brown roughly that same amount of money as well, and he's like a fringe All-NBA caliber player. Like, spending that type of money on OG just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So yeah, even though the reports are there, if OG continues to stall out on the idea that he should be making 30 to 35 million, I do believe moving forward, yeah, it's probably not going to be in the vein of him staying in New York Knicks. And I think that's fine. Now moving on to the Brooklyn Nets, and boy, have they dodged a massive bullet. Over the past year now, there's been constant conversation on what the hell is Brooklyn doing? Why are they not rebuilding? Because it's very, very clear that this team is effectively just filled with a bunch of role players. And with a team filled with a bunch of role players, still not being able to make the playoffs or in position to even make the play-in the Eastern Conference, that is very telling for a team that needs to hit the restart button. And over the past year, they were offered multiple trade packages that include several different draft picks, but they kept declining it over and over and over again for Mikal Bridges. And that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. But they caught a break because the New York Knicks were there to correct their wrongs and gave them the draft capital that they were effectively still going to receive in any other trade package that they saw early on in the year, if not a little bit more, which in my opinion is pretty crazy. I like Mikal Bridges, but I don't think I like him to the tune of potentially 5 first rounders. Furthermore, I want to also make this clear. This further sets the precedent of the value of certain players in the league. I've said this multiple times. I said it in other videos, in comment sections, on Twitter, on stream. I'm going to say it to you again. Bro, I'm going to say it again. When players like Drew Holiday get traded for as many draft picks that he got moved for, when Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert gets traded for the amount of draft picks that they got moved for, DeJounte Murray gets traded for the amount of draft picks, and that sets a precedent and a price point for everyone in the league to just completely start from. And so now, in this year's market moving forward, everyone is going to look at, hey, the Knicks gave up how much draft picks for Mikal Bridges? I know I need to get XYZ for DeJounte Murray. I know I need to get XYZ for Donovan Mitchell. I know I need to get XYZ for Paul George, Jimmy Butler, etc., etc. All of the players that could be moved in the next upcoming month or two. Yeah, that's what I need to get. I need to get that. I need to get that Mikal Bridges special. That's what I need to get. So the price point has been set in the market, and I think a lot of people, especially some of my Laker fan out there, man, my Laker brotherhood, y'all need to understand this is the price that people are paying for these caliber players. But shout out to Brooklyn, got the draft capital that they needed. Some could argue that maybe Memphis's draft picks were probably going to be a bit more valuable, but regardless, you got 5 draft picks, have at it. And moreover, and why I think this is a huge trade, not just for the Knicks, not just for the Nets, but for everyone else in the league, because this trade does clearly identify that the Nets are now trying to prepare themselves for the upcoming draft, because next year's draft is much better than this year's draft, and more importantly, probably going to unload on a lot of other players on that roster. Nick Claxton Claxton, free agent. Highly doubt they're going to sign him to a long-term deal because I don't believe that he wants to be a part of a complete rebuild. DFS on an expiring contract. Cam Johnson on a palatable deal. I believe 2 or 3 years left, roughly making around 20 to 23 million. Ben Simmons, last year of his contract, $40 million expiring. So many teams would love to have that if it meant that they can unload a bloated contract under their books, get an expiring, and just completely write it off when they buy out Ben Simmons out of his deal. And so for the Knicks, you got to upgrade that is necessary that potentially gives you an out if you cannot come to the same agreement for OG Anunoby and the amount of money he's asking for. If you're the Brooklyn Nets, you start on your rebuild, you get as much draft capital as possible, and in the process of doing so, probably unload on a lot of other players as well. But if you're the rest of the league, you got a couple of options now. There's some wings that are now available, and everybody knows what the Boston Celtics just did. Wing-oriented team, looking at the entire postseason as well, having versatile defenders or versatile athletic players on the perimeter, very valuable in today's game. Not saying that DFS is the greatest player, certainly has seen a lot of regression, but again, I think he'll look better, very similar to Mikal, on a reduced role with a better defensive core around him. Not saying that Cam Johnson hasn't also regressed coming off a season where he's been injured. However, I believe, again, he'll look much better playing alongside star caliber players that will maximize who he is. Nick Claxton, by far one of the most underrated players in the NBA, and will look certainly better playing next to star caliber players. If you are a team that may swing and miss in free agency because you cannot land another star, Brooklyn is having a fire sale, and they have a bunch of quality rotation pieces, potentially for the low, because I do believe a lot of those players, their value is probably the lowest it's been in years. I believe this is a great win-win-win for everybody. Win for the Knicks, upgrade at a position that they need at a much cheaper price than they may have to pay OG Anunoby. Win for the Nets, start tanking, get as much draft capital as you can. Win for the league because now there's more players available that are, in my opinion, really good rotational pieces that can be maximized for everyone else. Love to see it, man. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your biggest winners and losers in this trade. Also, I'm going to continue to upload more videos on this channel every single time there is a trade that goes through. So make sure you go check me out when it comes to that. Furthermore, tomorrow is the NBA draft. Take that back. Today is the NBA draft. So if you ever want to see my live reactions to any news that happens in the NBA, that's where I'll be at. Playback.tv/Lowes Room. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.